Ed and Roy competition, shaking dandruff in their heads. Ed has an obvious advantage because he's got a lot more hair than Roy does. And he also goes on a lot more journeys than Roy does these days. Therefore, not having as many showers, which adds to the numerous amount of dandruff in his hair. So, what ends up happening is it kicks off where he undoes his braid, flipping his hair out, sending dandruff like sakura blossoms in the wind, as it all drifts and is beautiful into the air.
Switch!
When he notices he's at a complete disadvantage, Roy snaps his finger and makes fire to spark off all the dandruff inside and burns it completely off and he's bald. And Roy shakes his luscious black hair. It has one tiny piece of dandruff.
Okay, switch.
The previously accumulated cloud of dandruff that Ed had managed to create caught part of the spark, and the fuel-air mixture suddenly exploded, sending a fireball across the competition grounds.
Story. Die.
And everybody died.
Switch.
And in a bit of rage, Edward turns his hand into a giant pair of scissors and tries to shear off Roy Mustang's hair. Roy, quickly and immediately countering this attack, burns his hands off.
Story.
And then, when all hope was lost, Edward pulls out the Philosopher's Stone and grants himself a new flowing hairdo. One that wildly rainbow shines in the bright skies and flicks dandruff all over the competition.
Switch.
The audience doesn't like this very much, and in fact, when he uses the Philosopher's Stone, it kind of overdoes it a little bit, and his hair goes so long, it's kind of like tangled. He can now use his hair as like a whip. And he decides that right now, because his dandruff is flying like dangerously close towards both the judges and the audience, he's going to propel it like a helicopter propeller and blow all the dandruff into the air, which then causes it to form into like a gigantic cloud over the competition of dandruffy, dastardly terror. And the entire area is like, oh no, where is this? You weathercast man, you lied to us, it was supposed to be a flawless sunny day. And so the mob forms.
Then Armstrong comes out, rips off his clothes and flexes, and his glorious sweaty body illuminates the sky. Brings life back to the tournament of dandruff shaking.
Story.
And then Mustang runs back out with his pictures of his daughters, of course, shoving it into Al's face, making sure he cannot shake the dandruff from his long luscious hair.
Okay, switch.
And when Armstrong went sprinting in for many generations, he caught wind from the dandruff cloud, and it created a dandruff typhoon that ravaged the competition. Sensing the danger that was imminent, Roy Mustang quickly acts and blazes all the dandruff, setting off an explosion unlike anyone else has ever seen, burning off everyone's hair, and nearly ultimately ending the competition.
Switch.
Except there's one person whose hair didn't get burned. Only one. And that was Alphonse.
Mainly because he doesn't actually have hair. Being a suit of armor, that kind of helps. But, pulling open his helmet reveals that inside he had a kitten all along, which just so happens to also have dandruff, but was protected, so it wins the competition!
Okay, switch. But before you go, and then Ed and Roy went to the next competition, in which Armstrong supervised, and he had them compete in bodybuilding.
Armstrong, his many generations of Armstrong, they realize that Al and Roy are both weaklings. He rips off his shirt, runs in there, and lifts hundreds and hundreds of pounds, throwing Al out of the way, destroying his male armor, and Roy sets fire onto Armstrong's body.
Story. Die.
He's a fraud.
Switch. Okay, your turn.
And when Roy Mustang tried to burn Armstrong, he flexed magnificently and casted the flames away. And Edward and Roy, sensing that they were in danger of losing the weightlifting competition, they combined their alchemy powers to turn Alphonse into the heaviest weight in the world, one that not even the likes of Armstrong had seen. And Armstrong, not going to back down from a challenge for many generations, attempts to lift this heavy object. He hoists it high above his head, putting awe to the crowd, before it ultimately turned into dandruff through alchemy.
Switch.
Armstrong, now thoroughly powdered in dandruff, coughs, looks at everyone else, sparkles, floating next to his eyes, and says, "This competition is a victory for all of us." And then Roy, not being amused at all, lights all the dandruff on him on fire again, which cinders the room, but not the weights, and then decides that the weight competition is kind of ridiculous because neither of them are bodybuilders, and so the whole point of the fact that them being bodybuilders would be ridiculous, but he still decides to play it out with Ed, and decides, and finds out how much exactly he can lift, and then finds out how much Roy can lift, and then compares the two, and deciding that Roy, in fact, because of his height, not that Ed would know that, he decides that his height adds to it, and because he can lift more than Ed, he wins the competition because Armstrong is on fire and cindered on the ground, and so he can't lift any weights, which then means that Roy wins that competition. But then Riza Hawkeye decides to show up and say, "Alright then, let's have my competition in the fact that we're going to have a sharpshooting. Yeah!" And so they go to a sharpshooting range, and she pulls out a couple weapons for them, which just so happen to be pop guns.
Switch. Give it a good ending.
So, they were presented with pop guns. Edward and Roy looked at each other with the same amount of confusement on their faces. They both nodded in agreement, a silent agreement of which, that only they knew. Edward pulls out the Philosopher's Stone one more time, and turns both pop guns into high-caliber cannons. And then Roy lights off the cannons. Boom! Blowing holes through the walls, and the targets were destroyed. And because they were both using high-caliber cannons, they were both disqualified from the competition in the end, leaving the sharpshooter ace himself, as the victor.